doing that for a while.
That's the better way to do it. We really, in all of the episodes we ever did, we only had to cut a little bit of stuff because somebody was
Drunk.
Welcome to the Crossing the Stream podcast. I'm Eric.
And I'm Jesse, and this today with us is Michael Liddiard.
Yes, hello.
Hi, how are you today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Welcome to the first episode back with guests since we rebooted and changed our lovely name.
Okay, so what was it before?
A funny thing happened on the way to the podcast.
Which is a horrible name. Way too long. It's not even a good name.
Well,
But
I think
came up
Crossing the
with
Stream
name.
sounds
I liked
great.
the name.
Yeah, a little bit.
I got my wading pants on, so we're ready to rock this.
Waiting, are those actually swim shorts?
No, these are lacrosse shorts.
Oh, okay.
They're the most comfortable attire I can wear on a podcast.
That's fair. It's muggy out for, I don't know, the time of year that it is.
Yeah.
Yesterday was like 27 degrees
A
out.
beautiful day yesterday. Nice
It
day
was.
for a walk if you're out and about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One tradition that I'm going to carry through is I always ask our guests to describe themselves because they would do it better than I ever would. So what do you do professionally? How would you describe your career and what you do and what makes you tick?
Sure. Well, I think that really just starts back to the decision to get into law. So I am a lawyer. I'm practicing in St. Catharines. I opened up my own practice, which means I'm a solo lawyer, although I do have legal clerks. So basically, once you decide you want to go to law school, you've got to take the steps that are involved with that, and obviously that means that you got to be committed to the LSAT and get through the law program. And once you have your Juris Doctor, you're looking for articling. In my position, I actually took a program out of Ryerson University, the law practice program, which was a modified articling style program. So as far as who I am right now, certainly I'm fully in the practice of law, and that's part of what my daily grind is. But outside of that, it's nothing's really changed in terms of what I enjoyed about growing up in Niagara to begin with. So I think that's been positive as well, to be able to run a business in a place where I have a network of people that I've always been able to maintain, and now I'm growing that network. So I think that's pretty much captures. I haven't really described to you what I do for my job.
The first thing that I want to do is, what kind of law do you practice?
Yeah, what law do I practice? Well, it's important to state that every licensed lawyer in Canada, I should say, with the exception of Quebec, if you have your common law Juris Doctor, you're capable of practicing any practice area. So right now, my current focus is on mostly transactional work. So when I say transactional work, that's anything from residential transaction, purchases, sales, refinances, but also involving other commercial dealings, whether that's asset purchases, share purchases. So that's working with businesses as well. And so I meet people on a regular basis. My clients will come in for signing legal documents, but that's also transitioned a little bit with the COVID measures. I've increased my flexibility to allow people to meet digitally and virtually, and meet on Zoom and sign documents remotely. It's at their preference. I try to make it as reasonable for people. I think you have to take out of an appointment what you find most valuable, and a lot of people want to meet in person. So that's been part of my practice that I try to focus on, is giving people that level of comfort, whether it's a residential purchase and sale, which for most people is a huge deal. Mm-hmm. So it's the biggest decision that they've made, a lot of them financially. So meeting in person to give that overview of the process is something that I value. So, it's been it's the second full year of business. So I'm in my third year of practice now, which as a lawyer, I was called in 2018, meaning at that point I could start my own business, and I did so in 2019. So over the last 2 years, I've seen definitely a boom in real estate, which is interesting because, you know, affordability is always at the top of people's minds when they're moving into a location, and that's why seeing the rise in prices is really intimidating for people, which you got to get financial advice and work with somebody, whether it's your a mortgage advisor, a real estate professional, understand the industry, because if you haven't had a chance to get into the market, you really want to start doing some research now, because I'm not sure if it's going to go down in prices. It's hard to say.
Yeah, there's speculation that there's some kind of real estate bubble at this point, but then I see some articles now and then that, to the contrary, saying that things are going to keep going up. And
I feel like people don't really know.
No. Although it seems like there's a few things that are almost for sure at this point, like inflation is going, like we already see grocery prices and a lot of things scaling up really quickly right now, just because we've devalued our currency quite a bit since this pandemic, since we've been providing monetary relief to many people and things like that. So there's definitely a lot of risk for that, and that could keep maybe the prices high for a little bit longer. Have you seen, I guess, a trend like specifically very recently about maybe residential stuff increasing, and maybe like has the acquisition of like business properties gone up or down with it, or something like that?
The trend that I've seen, I mean, it's tough for me to say because as a growing business, I'm increasing my network, so I know overall volume. When you talk about volume, there's always a limit on the number of houses that are available at any one time, and so the number of listings that are available to you, if there's tons of demand, of course, that's driving your prices, and that's what we're seeing. So we are seeing a lot of investment. You talked about business acquisition. Well, it's important to state that you can own real estate, residential real estate, as a company, as a corporation in Ontario, and I'm not sure if that's the case across the country, but just from my experience in Ontario, it's totally permissible. And beyond that, as a business acquisition, you have investments. So you have people who are purchasing residential properties with the purpose of renting them out. So when you have people with excess funds, meaning that they're looking either to invest that in the stock market or looking to put that into some other form of investment. When it comes to real estate, that is an option for them. Duplexes, triplexes, but also single-family residential. So the question is that if there's this excess capital that individuals are putting into the residential market, and that's driving residential prices, are we doing enough actually to really help first-time home buyers? Because I think at that point, there's already there is an advantage for people who know the game and they're willing to outbid, and I think that's the stress that a lot of people are feeling when they're up against that.
Things I see online, a lot of people have already given up on the concept of home ownership, especially if they're from like a big city. They just pass it off as something that they'll never be able to do. Yeah. I think a lot of people don't really research it to the point where like they don't go and see if they can get a loan or see what the banks say. That's usually the first step that I've heard anyways, and that's what I've done. Yeah. For the houses that I've purchased. Yeah.
And it's great that you well, not great, but it's interesting that you say that, because it is something that I think is important, people giving up on the concept of ownership. There was a conversation recently where an individual had made this statement publicly. I believe it was the Canadian Mortgage Housing Corporation, and he was let go, basically saying, well, home ownership really is a thing of the past, which I think that's really upsetting to say that, because I understand that there's a lot of mobility. People have short-term contracts. Their employment is precarious, which maybe that sort of doubles down on this opinion that even if I wanted to own, my job isn't stable enough for me to want to make the mortgage investment, the mortgage commitment. But I think if you're going to counter that fear, you need to be aware of what your mortgage penalties are. So don't write off the concept of home ownership just because it's intimidating. You have to know the consequences of breaking a mortgage. So sure, if you buy a house and you have to sell it in 6 months because your employment has changed, all right, well, just know what's involved and know the potential risk to you, because it might not be as bad as you think.
Right. And I think the attitude of giving up on that is just another way that people are kind of giving in to corporations, because there are corporations that buy lots of houses. For instance, when I was looking for a house in Welland, sometimes stumbled upon ones that were for sale where the owner owned like 60 houses in the area, and they were just doing it as a business thing, and they were selling off one of them. So like
that's common in Welland because of all the student homes
Of
too.
course. And if you give up on the idea of buying any of these homes and you just rent, well, now you're just empowering people that are already big to a large degree, unless you rent from like a landlord that just has the one property or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. When you think of who's the person that's in the best position to rent, well, of course, there are situations where people are just transitioning in, they're looking for their forever home, or they're looking for an interim solution because they've relocated, students as well. So rental has its place, absolutely. And even single family home residential, there is a place. But to sort of second your point, I mean, 60 residential homes, I've never seen that, but I take it that is absolutely, I mean, it's possible. So the fact that it's possible means, it's possible that it's happened. And when you look at an area like Welland, the question becomes, okay, well, if somebody isn't, capable of taking a home, putting some work into it, and then selling it for a profit, well, that's not so bad, because we want people to put, keep the economy going, buying materials, getting contractors, and whether they do it themselves. I mean, it's a form of the economy. So, but then the question becomes, at what point are you pricing other people out, and local people who have been renting for some time and are watching their home ownership opportunities seem to fizzle because of the appreciation in the value. So there is a tension there for sure.
Mm-hmm. I guess the main thing that was, I guess, the most advantage for myself and my wife is we weren't really afraid of a fixer-upper, and there's lots of people like us out there. So
yeah, the
two houses that we have, one is a duplex that we rent out here in Welland, and one is in Niagara Falls. They both needed some work, and especially the one in Welland, we've put quite a lot of work into that house at this point. Not even for the purpose of flipping it, but just to make it more of a nice place for people to rent. So if you're not afraid of doing that work, you can look at the lower end of the market.
Absolutely, and you have to. And even if you're not particularly, involved in a trade yourself, or you're not sure, I mean, if you're going to be purchasing a house, just expect that there might be some things that aren't perfect with it, and don't let that stop you.
And if you can get an inspection too, you can figure out what things are critical. Like if the whole house is on an angle or something like that, and it's pretty much unfixable as far as the framing or the foundation or something goes, you should know that. But there's other things like, the kitchen's ugly.
Yeah,
you can redo a kitchen.
Sure.
You can get a contractor to do a kitchen for you.
So something that's happened that I've seen with the competitiveness of the industry is a lot of people are waiving their home inspection.
Yes,
and something
fast.
Yeah. And so they're waiving their home inspection. They're being pressured to waive conditions for financing. And what a condition for financing is, of course, is you're giving the seller a 14-day window where you're saying, okay, I'm going to make an offer on your home, but I want to not only do an inspection in some situations, but also make sure that I've got my mortgage lined up. So now you basically have to show up to a lot of these listings, and you have to be able to say, I'm already pre-approved, I'm confident in my ability to finance, and I know what mortgage amount I need based upon the offer that I'm making. So when people waive these types of conditions, that's a whole added stress too, because they don't get that wiggle room. If you find something on a home inspection, which is a defect that's material to your decision, for instance, the wiring is aluminum versus copper or something.
Yeah, and you got to rip all of it out
and
or something.
Now you're getting advice from the home inspector to say, hey, this breaker is old, it's got to be redone, this appliance here, this, things that would ordinarily influence your a decision to make an offer at a certain price. You're waiving that. And then if you find these issues after you've already secured the deal, the question is, well, if the situation didn't change, meaning it was like that when you made the offer, you're going to have a real uphill battle saying I'm entitled to a price abatement or reduction or some compensation. And, the challenge legally for that is, okay, well, but you could have done an inspection. And these are things that, homes are bought, resold. The seller might not even have any awareness,
of course not,
of some of the issues that are actually, facing the home, or leave it up to your due diligence and buyer caveat emptor, buyer beware.
Yeah, sometimes it's really contextual too. Like when I got my second house, I don't think we got an inspection, but we had a pretty good idea of what we're looking for. Like my fiance, she knows a lot about the electrical side of things, and like I'm pretty good with the structural side of things, like framing and all that. But the one thing we didn't know about was there was an issue with the sewer outpipe to the street, because things were misaligned and a tree was growing in there and stuff. And it wasn't so bad that things were backing up when we bought the home. But shortly after moving in, we had our washing machine malfunction, and it just ran for like 6 hours. The basement flooded.
Oh, see,
and who would have saw that coming?
But absolutely.
I mean, I don't know if every inspection's going to catch something like that either. So there's risks always when you're buying a house.
Absolutely, and that's the hardest part, because you're pinching your last pennies a lot of the time, especially as a first-time home buyer, and then you have an unforeseen issue. So. Home warranty programs are some lenders will offer a home warranty program, which means if you have a breakdown in your major home systems, you might get compensation, which again, these are all ways to mitigate your risk and make it easier for you and give you more confidence when you're making that home purchase. But my experience, especially in residential, has been if you can get in, you can get the right advice. Owning to go back to that point of having ownership be some foregone concept, I think that's ridiculous. Now, condominiums are another question too, because what are you owning? Maybe you don't have a yard, maybe you don't have certain features that other freehold homes would have, but it's also a lifestyle question. Certain cities that's the way of life. Yeah. You're in a condominium, which during COVID is certainly stressful, which is why you've seen added pressure on suburban areas.
Yeah, big efflux from the city.
Absolutely, sure. Yeah. There's an exodus, and I don't blame them. I mean, I don't know about when you guys grew up, what your area was like, but in Niagara, it was a lot of, like, for me, I got to run around a lot of land and vineyards everywhere. The backyard, basically the whole city was the backyard. And when you go to a place, in Toronto, and you see just the concrete jungle, and now you're in lockdown.
Yeah.
So I think there's an emotional toll as well, and a psychological toll for these people who can only do so much with respect to the ownership and the design and the improvement. And I think that's sort of an intrinsic human desire. When you own something, you want to be able to do those upgrades. I mean, you mentioned, Tila's got some electrical knowledge. Mm-hmm. Well, that's been one of the most valuable things for me as a lawyer as well, is networking. So if you have an opportunity to get a fixer-upper and you have a network of people that you can say, hey, I think this individual would be a good resource to help me with this side of my project. Reaching out to lots of people, maintaining a diverse network, and even doing that maybe before you get into your home purchase, thinking about the people who might help you with the electrical, might help you with, if we have to redo this appliance, we're doing a kitchen reno. It's a lot of research, sure, but ask your friends, see what their home purchasing experience was like. You mentioned a flood. Well, I've got, an individual that I have to refer to because there's a crisis with a client and they need a phone number, and that's kind of cool too, because I have a Rolodex. I've got a network as well that when people have an issue, I can say, hey, okay, here's who you should call. But that's definitely part of the exodus too, is they want to be able to have that management over and control over a piece of land. Mm-hmm. Build a tiki hut in the back, or do something unique.
There's an interesting further extent, like a secondary exodus that I've seen too, even like in the activities of my own parents, where I grew up in a suburb that was quite far out into the country, way north of the GTA, and it was a good place to grow up. It wasn't too busy, but now with this huge efflux of people from the cities, they said, well, now's a good time to move because house prices are way up, so they can basically cash out and move further into the country and build a home out there or do what they want. They ended up on a farm with 160 acres kind of thing. So So there's an interesting, people are kind of spreading out, which is definitely different. I don't know, maybe if enough people leave the city, that could possibly drive prices down eventually, because there'll be lots of rooms for rent and things like that.
Yeah, it's interesting to think that a lot of people want to have that the hobby farm lifestyle too.
Yeah.
They want the ducks and the chickens and the,
It's an interesting thing because it's a lifestyle thing that can be kind of marketed to you online, but at the same time, it's not like somebody's really specifically is benefiting from it. It's not like you're buying into a clothing brand or a type of food that, somebody has a monetary stake in. You're just kind of living your best life in that way.
Yeah,
just having something to do.
It's a romantic ideal.
Yeah.
Of the human initiative. You've got this whether or not, even if you are, there's individuals who would say, you shouldn't have hobby like farms in a sense of having chickens that you're slaughtering for your own meat and things like that.
It depends a lot on your own motivations. I've done my research on things like that. It doesn't seem like it's specifically a good financial choice, but like it's not cheaper than buying eggs. But at the same time, if you're consuming eggs, you're contributing to somebody else farming chickens. So if you don't care about the money end of it, I guess it's about the same thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's very deep rooted in, like I said, that intrinsic desire to take care of your own homestead. So it's interesting when that question becomes an urban question. People want to have the chicken coop in an urban space, and there's a lot of interesting situations where people.
I think even bylaws in Niagara, you can only have 3 chickens.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
You know more about this than I do, I guess.
Well, there's lots of stuff like that does interest me. I do subscribe to the rural kind of idea. I'm just trying to move vertically, essentially. I have these 2 houses, and maybe when I retire, I can sell one or both, and I can move somewhere nicer that has a bit of land to it.
Is there a place in Ontario that you'd like to see, or
to live?
Well, I don't know, rural areas that you visited, things that you.
It's tricky because I think the Niagara region, and then like essentially the strip of land around around Lake Erie, are my picks for places to be just because of the weather. Like, it's unbelievable how much better the weather is here than even the GTA and like anything north of it. That's the reason why I stayed, because I didn't come from around here. I went to school at Brock University, and I decided, yep, this is about the nicest place in Ontario that I could live year round anyway.
I feel like that's what Niagara's calling card.
Yeah.
It's good weather most of the time. Our winters are not bad. I like it. In general, I'm like him. I didn't move from as far away, but
and things were a lot cheaper in Niagara than a lot of other places, because from what I've seen, there was a lot of people leaving Niagara due to an economic downturn back in about 1990 or so. So like there was a lot more houses that were vacant, and things got cheaper overall. I mean, I'm sure they're way back up beyond where they ever were now, but they were cheaper for a bit, even 4 years ago when I was looking at houses.
One of the real estate agents that I'm friends with, he had said that years ago, if you said you were a real estate agent in Niagara, other agents would laugh at you. And now it's flipped.
Yeah.
Because
you're not making as much per deal, right? If the housing prices are low and you're selling a house for $220,000, you have to work. You have to do 4 deals to the guy who just sold a house for $880,000, right? Mm-hmm. So, you put in that perspective, you're working a lot harder, and now you've seen that $220,000 house now being sold for $450,000, $500,000.
Plus, the thing is, the real estate agent rates haven't gone down. A lot of times they're still like 4%, 5%, something like that. But the houses are flipping. Like, they don't have to sit there and sell the house for a month. It's gone in 2 days after listing or something like that.
Yeah.
So I think the real estate agents are doing pretty good right now.
Yeah, they're having a blast. They're having a blast.
They're all driving their fancy cars and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, I think that comes with the territory. What else do you do? Mm-hmm. Unless you're investing your money into farms, which I think, like that hobby farm. I think if you had a toss up between owning a nice piece of land and owning a vehicle like that,
for them,
depreciates immediately.
It's true. It does. It's not an asset by any measure. I think it's a lot about their image too, because like you're kind of like a local celebrity if you're a real estate agent and you're good at it.
Faces are on the billboards.
You're on the billboards. You have this big smiling, personality and all that.
It's interesting to think of it as an expense, as a marketing expense in a way. And
it's definitely marketing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess at that point, then, can you fault them for for driving the?
Usually, I mean, nowadays it's Tesla that's the trendy one.
Yeah,
but a lot of times it's a
really
Mustang or like a big flashy SUV vehicle or something.
Yeah. Well, my 2014 Chevy Cruze has a few issues, so maybe at some point I'll adopt the image and.
What? Can we get into what kind of issues?
We could get into all the issues. Let's get into.
Did the turbo go?
So the turbo is going.
Yeah.
So let's go. Okay. So the turbo is going. There is a constant tick 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 sound.
Okay.
And a new issue which has surprised me is the thermometer, sticky thermometer, and it tells me that it's overheating.
The thermostat.
That's
thermostat. A cheap fix. So
okay.
At least you do
all
that
right.
one.
We can take. We'll take care. We'll talk about that after. If you can help me with that, get me through to the summer, and we'll see if I can.
I'm not super brand loyal when it comes to cars, but I have a general idea of what is not super reliable, and unfortunately the Cruzes are not super reliable, especially the turbochargers, because that's an expensive
but
fix.
when the turbo works, wow.
Oh, it's fast. They're quick. Yeah, they're great. I've seen
1 in 10 gas pedal pumps, and
And you're getting good fuel economy.
Oh yeah, that's part of the because I took it to New Brunswick, right? So I did my law degree in out east, and I needed a vehicle that was really fuel efficient. And I was driving around the East Coast when I was playing lacrosse out east as well for the university, and you'd play games in Nova Scotia, and you'd be on 4-hour treks. So I wanted to make sure I had a vehicle that was really fuel efficient. That was the primary motivation.
What did you like about being out east?
That is honestly, I love talking about the East Coast because
I'd love to hear about it.
For me, law school is stressful. There are some people who it's kind of you take out of law school what you put into it, and for me, having a law degree in a province where you were not only the program size was small enough that you really got to understand your professors, you really got to meet people, like you really understood people. So your head is in the books as much as you need it to be in the books, but there's always an opportunity to have a pint with a professor and talk. And these are world-renowned scholars who are getting cited by the Supreme Court, and then you're joking around with them at the grad house or something. It's like I think that's a unique thing that I know other law schools don't have. And the East Coast in general has a really good reputation for that sort of camaraderie and wanting other people to hold other people up in the sense of supporting them. And I think I experienced that, and I haven't talked to somebody who said anything different. So I guess that's definitely a positive. And traveling in general, when I finished my undergrad, a professor that I really respected said, "You've got to get out of the province," which is a hard thing to say because I'm really really committed to my roots. I've really always loved, the life that my family built for me, and really loved my community and always wanted to give back to my community. So to hear somebody threaten you've got to get out, it was a strange thing to hear, but there is something to be said about meeting, or at least seeing and encountering a different way of life. And I know that's why people travel and they want to go see different parts of the world, but even seeing a different part of Canada, whether it's east or west, sometimes it is nice to be able to invest in another way of living. And I say that with respect, because when you go to some of the homes that are out east, and some of the way that they embrace you and make you part of their family immediately, that's really special.
That's the thing that I always hear about from friends that have gone out east to PEI, to Nova Scotia, somewhere like that. It's always about the people and about the friendliness.
They're friendly. They're very friendly.
Yeah.
Even just a few days there, you can tell the people are just... Maybe life's a little slower out there. I don't know.
Well, I'll give you a good example, and this is a typical Ontariable observation. This is what the people who are disgruntled Ontarians are from Ontariable. And so one of the observations that I made is they're very, very particular about the crosswalk. I'm always getting one foot out in front of the cross, when the light changes on the crosswalk. But there's maybe Fredericton's a government town, so maybe that's part of it. I didn't go to a crosswalk in Moncton. Maybe they have a different perspective. But you get to the crosswalk and you wait till that walking man is flashing. That's that's part of their thing. And I was sitting down having lunch at a patio, and somebody honked their horn, and another local kind of shouted "This isn't Toronto," You don't get to just honk your horn. Also tried to hail a cab. You can't hail cabs. You gotta call them. They don't just pick you up, even if they're empty. That's not the system.
That's
you can't point your finger and be like, "I'm important, let me in." They're like, "No, you're not that important."
That's strange, because I can't see any business reason not to just let a person into a vacant cab.
Well. Yeah, I don't know.
Small
I don't know. I don't think that's not always the motivating factor.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, there's just and they're comfortable with that. And you just learn a lot about that way of living, and kitchen parties.
Friendliest wait staff in PEI too. Kind of a weird thing, but at restaurants they're so much more down to earth and friendly. I found
that's a really good observation too.
The restaurant that we went to, we shot a wedding in PEI, and we drove to PEI, and the restaurant that we went to after the wedding the following morning, I will always go back because the wait staff was just out of this world and friendly.
Mm-hmm. Any server, anybody who's in service delivery always treats you like, you know, you've got something important to say and they want to learn from you. Like that's kind of, and now as a lawyer, I value that even more, because if you get to know the person before you even have to help them with a legal issue, you're going to understand their goals and their motivations a lot differently, and you're going to be able to build that level of communication, which is so fundamental. And they do that out of habit down there. They do that a way of, it's an interpersonal skill that is truly seeking a way to connect with you with every way of with every dialogue.
Yeah.
So that's special, because you don't always get that, like somebody who's serving you at a restaurant or whatever the case is, you know, Canadian Tire, you're buying something and it's like, how are you doing? And if you say not good, they're not going to look at you in surprise. They're going to say, what the heck happened? You know, like, tell me about it.
That's cool.
Tell me about it. Because they've got, they've got stories to share too, and they're happy. Absolutely. Like, at least, you know, the people that I know that grew up there, for what it's worth, being somebody from Ontario, not necessarily, you know, I didn't make it clear that I wanted to stay in the East Coast. It was an option for me. I mean, it always is when you move to another place, but that didn't dissuade anybody from absolutely giving me that same sort of positivity and support. So that's cool.
Yeah. And one interesting thing, I don't know if this is something you want publicly known, but I thought it was interesting.
Yeah.
Before the travel ban, we'll say, you're a jet-setting lawyer, so I found out, right?
Oh yeah. No, of course that can be publicly known. 100%. Well, before the travel ban,
did a huge chunk of this business deal from Florida.
Oh. Yeah, so I actually did the asset transaction for this business here.
Yeah.
Silvestri.
Yep.
In an airport, and calling the other lawyer.
Fort Lauderdale?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I've been there.
So it was really interesting because part of it was the digital signings, which I set up, but the other part of it was, calling the other lawyer who I wasn't sure if we were going to be able to close. Anyways, this is a good story. I'm happy to tell it. I don't think I told you where I was going to be, but I said I'll get it done for you, right, Jess?
I think your assistant told me.
Okay, yeah, my assistant told you, yeah. But to me, that's irrelevant. Like, I think that this is part of the global sort of opportunities, and it is disappointing that I haven't been able to have that jet setter type lifestyle, because I had a lot of fun, you know, doing legal work in an airport, and you know, getting transactions closed, and the way I move money. I think I even sent the wire from my laptop in the airport to close the transaction. So like, I was moving money using internet Wi-Fi. Yeah. And that's another really important feature too, is the transformation to the industry of how lawyers do business. So on top of the digital transformation, meaning the documents that you signed were set up electronically for your signature that way, is how money moves. I mean, 5 years ago, there were very few firms that would ever have the commercial platform set up where the lawyer could just take the laptop and send the money on that way. The traditional process was always get a check cut and go down to the bank and certify it. But my experience since adopting the commercial tools has been, maybe I am in Florida, maybe I'm in Hawaii, but you know, that's actually a vision for most. I would say most entrepreneurs now, and I see myself, you know, in that regard. The idea of being in ball and chain tied to the desk lawyer. Yeah, well, there's a place for that. There's a 9 to 5. But if I have to shift things around and maybe take a few more digital appointments that week because I am away, well, okay. I think that's also a cool lifestyle achievement. You know, you've got
very cool lifestyle,
right? You know, and then the only downfall being maybe the farm lifestyle view if my Wi-Fi isn't is a little spotty. But I think Elon Musk's going to take care of that.
I was about to say that there's now new satellite internet on the horizon that's actually good, apparently, because what I've always heard about satellite internet before is that it's terrible.
The Starlink, isn't that what it
Yeah,
is?
And Biden
that's
announced the other day that he considers high-speed internet to be a fundamental infrastructure in the States.
Is it a human right? Is
Yeah.
access to internet a human right? Freedom of information?
be that
It
point.
makes sense how it could, especially in countries where the population is quite poor and not well connected, it could elevate all those people to a level playing field in many regards to the rest of the world. Like,
So is internet a public good? If so, should we not be ensuring the equality of its delivery across?
it makes sense, especially as far as like commerce is concerned. If you don't want just mega corporations to rule the world, you could have some guy in some remote part of the world that, you know, spins some kind of crazy fabric into some kind of exotic clothing, and maybe that's going to be the next trend, and this guy could elevate a business in some place of the world that never would have been able to do it before, or any other interesting business venture that appeals to the globe.
Yeah. So people should have the ability to, as a consumer, make those decisions as well. I guess the tension here is, do we have freedom of information for the purposes of critique and, you know, analysis and commentary, and that's where you get into, you know, the sources of your information. But then the second question is well, access to information, what does that really mean? Like, what kind of critical skills do you have that you want to employ to maybe not take all the information at face value? So I think that's
So maybe you're saying that people that maybe have not had the internet before this might not have the skepticism required to use it.
Well, I don't know.
People that have had the internet for 20 years still don't have the skepticism
No,
to use
most
it.
do not. Yes.
Yeah, I think skepticism is part and parcel of what we have to do as humans.
Like every single article I read now that seems even slightly off, I'm double and triple checking because there's so much out there.
But the idea of a free internet at least means that you can, even if it's wrong, you can access all information.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think that's a good. People will sort themselves to a degree.
Yeah. There's a great book on the founding of the Oxford Dictionary. It's called The Madman and the Professor, something like that. And it charts out one of the main contributors to this encyclopedia. And so the idea of an encyclopedia of knowledge, this was a major human undertaking. The idea that we would have a dictionary which charts out, the etymology, and it goes through the history of the word and its most common usages. This is a major undertaking. And so you think about Wikipedia, that seems like a public good too. It seems like everybody should be able to access this encyclopedia, this database of knowledge.
Yeah.
And then the question becomes, well, what points of information, even within this database, are contested or political? Right, so the political ramifications of delivering information is something that you got to be skeptical about. I mean, why wouldn't you be?
That's fair. I think at least with Wikipedia, since it is such an open platform, open to public editing and things like that, you're at least a little bit less of a risk of being fed something that's propaganda or something worse.
Yeah,
because
you should be able to trust it.
If there's multiple versions of the same event, it'd be nice to be able to see all of those and have it put forth that there are some differing of opinions on things.
Yeah,
it's almost like a lot of stuff, like say the dictionary or whatever that gets published and is the first to come to the public. It almost takes all of this information, all these variances, and it solidifies it in one form, and then that kind of sets the tone for the future. Like, there really wasn't such a rigid definition of words before there was a dictionary where people would look up and, well, that's the definition.
Yeah, absolutely. You're using the word wrong. No, I'm not. And this goes back and forth until there's a duel.
Duel to the death.
Yeah. Well, but no, I really do think, like, as much as people will criticize, the press, and they're going to say, well, this is fake or this is fake. I haven't heard anybody really point to Wikipedia and say these contributors are misleading. I don't know. Have you guys heard anybody really calling out Wikipedia and saying this is there's a political agenda behind the contributions? Maybe it's decentralization as part of its ability to
I feel by
thrive.
the time you complained about it, it probably would have been changed anyway.
So you have to go a level deeper if you really want to figure out what is misinformation on Wikipedia, because as much as when I was in school, teachers would say it's not a legitimate source, it has sources.
And so they're sourcing their information.
Yeah, it has
means
its
it's
legitimate sources at the bottom,
Yeah.
and say that they're scholarly articles reviewed by, a scientist and their peers. you can go to those articles, and I'm sure some of those are biased. They were paid for by said drug company, or paid for by some other corporate interest, and there might be some misinformation here and there, but it's at the level beyond the general aggregator of information that is Wikipedia. So you could at least have a few different viewpoints, especially if it's something that's been, the effect of a drug has been studied by different groups, at least.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun in it was like it was high school, and changing some basketball Wikipedia page to add all my friends' nicknames, and that was a poor use of my.
But it gets scrubbed quickly enough if anybody cares.
I was
I remember doing that in high school too,
upset.
Changing the Tilsonburg Wikipedia page to mention my friends and I and whatnot, and probably like 2 hours, and it was gone. And the person who changed it back, I guess, was able to. I don't know if he had to make a profile, I can't remember, but was actually able to message the profile and say, haha, very funny, it's back to normal.
Yeah, nice try, bud.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Can you even do that?
You can still make contributions. I think there might be a bit more of a vetting process.
There's more of an audit process.
If it's a commonly viewed page. If it's something if it's a brand new page, or if it's something, I guess, that isn't accessed as much, I think there might be different rules, or you might be able to get away with putting misinformation for longer.
Yeah, that sucks.
It's been a while since I've thought, I need to change this Wikipedia article.
This Wikipedia page is insufficient.
They've been filtered by so many people. It is... I forget what the principle is, but it's the idea that if you survey the population about a given topic or a given problem or something like that, a lot of people are wrong, but enough people are wrong in both directions that when you average the output of all the population, you end up pretty darn close to the right answer. Like, for instance, the number of jelly beans in a jar. People are way off, but when you average everybody together, you get pretty close.
Yeah, I'm really good with those guessing games.
I never thought about that. That makes a lot of sense.
So what does that mean then? Like, that you're supposed to have both sides to get to the middle?
Perhaps. It lets people...
That's a good lesson in general.
Yeah. And then again, somebody might say that that's a false dichotomy. I mean, we look at the idea in our politics all the time that there's left wing and there's right wing.
Yeah.
It's kind of a false dichotomy. Things exist along the spectrum. Also, things that get anchored as political party, like single issues and stuff like that, it's strange that they ever got associated with the parties to begin with, other than just to gain voter traction. It's populism, I guess. Yeah, there's a lot of that. I mean, that's pretty much how politics works these days in North America, anyways.
Well, the whole basis of brokerage politics is that political parties ought to be reaching out to the common denominator in both directions, whether left or right. So you fall in the middle, like we were saying, the truth that people want to hear, or the one that's actually most pragmatic. Because regardless of the nuances, regardless of the disambiguations, if there's an issue and you reach in the middle, you have a common denominator, then we ought to at least try to build that into the agenda. And, is that a fault of democracy in a sense, right? Are you asking us to go to the middle when there might be, like you said, there's a false dichotomy, there is a right answer here? Is that the question? Well, I think that's tough, because there's always going to be people who want to know that at least they've been able to make their contribution and to weigh in on an issue. And if the consensus is that it's that a decision needs to be made in one direction, well, okay, that's the way it should be. At least as far as I'm concerned, there's going to be a dialogue, always, no matter what.
It's a fair evaluation. I guess it's why we're stuck with the political arena that has existed for a long time now, just because it kind of works good enough to keep itself going.
Yeah, well, it's there's a quote, democracy is the worst form of government besides all the others.
Besides all the others that we haven't tried yet.
So I don't know. I don't know what the thing is democracy in the way that you engage people should change. It should evolve. So the concept democracy as an idea, as a concept, what it means is participation. So it shouldn't be static. The way we understand democracy can't be static, because the way we relate to each other changes in the mediums that we use and the way that we express ourselves. The Instagram versus the Twitter versus the, the way that we're engaging our information for pragmatic purposes to make decisions as a society. It's changing. So what does engagement mean? What does it look like to engage your political structure? through formal or informal structures. And democracy has to adapt. How you reach the decision makers and the stakeholders within that specific issue area, that's going to change.
It seems like the thing that always, whenever there's a big thing that the people are pushing for politically, it's always call your representatives. That's still the thing that I hear from every person that's concerned about any single issue. And I guess that makes sense as to why it would be the number one way that you could influence politics yourself, is if just a massive amount of people are calling their specific representative that can, go up the chain to a degree. Because it does seem like at the highest level, the government's pretty unreachable. Yeah, you need lots of levels of filtering before it gets to the prime minister or the party in power.
Which is why, for what it's worth, thinking of unreachable, up until the COVID situation, if you wanted to text Doug Ford, he had a text line that he would actually respond to. Yeah. He gave out his cell phone, and he was very public about saying he would legitimately stay up late at night responding to messages and trying to work it out. And when COVID hit, he said, I had to stop.
Of course, it's unworkable.
More overwhelming than usual, so I had to stop. But that,
very divisive too,
out of everybody, was a great idea.
Yeah, I think Peter really, the way that he's handled the response to COVID has really shifted a lot more people into favor with what he's saying, and a lot more people out of favor too. So I don't know.
It is divisive. Yeah. I don't envy being a government official.
I don't know what I would have done
during times of crisis. How difficult is your decision making process? And you're relying on the same science and evidence and facts that other people are relying on.
It seems like they're always going to err on the side of caution, because even if there's some reason to believe that maybe personal freedom should be put first and things like that, if things get really bad because they didn't restrict things enough, they're going to be to blame. So why would they put themselves in harm's way? They can just say, well, we'll restrict it as much as we can, because then you can't blame me.
Well, then that perspective says that the end goal is to stay in power, right? And that is a difficult question. If your decision-making process is, let's err on the side of caution because we won't be blamed in the event that we're wrong, well, you're just seeking re-election at that time. Yes. You're not necessarily you're not taking your argument to the logical conclusion and saying, okay, but what if this measure was unnecessary? What is the actual cost? So my perspective on it is, when you have to make decisions, there's a bureaucracy behind you as well. And if you can't convince the bureaucratic actors, whether they're the people in the health, people in labor, people who have to implement these policies, especially lockdown. If there isn't a consensus even among the bureaucrats, then you've lost legitimacy. Then the decision, as much as it errs on the side of caution, at least for your optics, if it lacks legitimacy, then it ought not to be pursued. And so, I understand that it's lockdown's been divisive.
It's getting more divisive. Yeah. I think there's a fourth one. Like, if we come out of it and then there's a fourth wave and they have to shut things down again, that's when there's going to be anarchy.
It's the question
anarchy right now.
So it's the question of what the lockdowns are actually doing, how much they're actually achieving. Because it's easy enough to say COVID cases are on the rise, so that means we need to be more strict. But are the measures actually helping that much? I should look back into it, because I'm curious to know how the states that are not restricting like anything, like for instance Florida, how are they doing?
Well, their numbers are, as far as I understand, and look, I don't have anything in front of me, but
the states was way worse to begin with.
And now there's been some sort of a leveling out, as I understand, which again calls into question what's the pain versus payoff, right? Like, do you have to front load the misery so that you have some stability on the back end, or do you delay the misery and you stretch it out over a period of time and then hope that you reach that same stable period, right? It's kind of like what roller coaster ride do you want? Do you want the lazy river, or do you want the vertical drop? And it's tough because you can step aside and you can say, well, I don't have to make that decision because my government does. But you also have to ask, okay, well, what is the consensus? Because if no one's asking the questions of what is the outcome, what is the logical consequence, if nobody's raising those questions, the government's not going to be able to do a very good job.
No.
Because they do rely on the pulse, the political pulse of the nation, the political pulse of a region, and you have to field that.
I think after all this is done, whenever it finally finishes for a while, there will at least be a predictive model for what to do if ever a virus ever arose again and was of a similar amount of the ability to spread and things like that, because you can study every country in the world, every state, every whatever, and see what worked and what didn't, and just at least you might have something a bit more concrete that's less politically divisive, because we say we know that this is the best method.
Well, the challenge, of course, with all that is when they start talking about extra variants of the illness, which kind of makes you call into question, well, even if we were perfect, if we return to normal society and there's another variant, how have we avoided that altogether? I mean, it is it's a frustrating concept for sure.
The key thing that always seems to be brought up whenever there's a new variant is like, what does that actually mean? Like, I hear that some doctors are saying some of them are more virulent than others, some are more deadly than others, things like that.
They attach themselves to younger people. The ICUs have a higher percentage of younger people in critical situations.
It'd be interesting to know, like, how many of these variants are surviving, you know, side by side, and like how many.
Yeah.
Like, what exactly is going on with that? Because it does seem a bit like a scare tactic the way that it's always put out.
It really does, and that.
Like, oh, it mutated, because that's a scary word, right?
Yeah, that's very intimidating.
If it is a problem, of course, we should be concerned about it. But at the same time, I think it's been said way too many times. Oh, it's a new mutated strain. Well, okay.
Well, how exhausting is that to hear that? You know, the idea that you know, regardless of the perfection of the lockdown measures that you implement, there might ultimately be another variant.
Yeah.
So I think what you have to do for people, at least to instill hope, that they're going to be able to have some return to normalcy, is try to moderate the real concern that there are variants, there are strains, there are things that are going to happen. And regardless of COVID, there could be a very aggressive flu that kills a lot of people.
Of course.
And so you have different types of airborne illnesses. And what you're saying to people in general, the message shouldn't waver. Yeah, there might be new variants, but here's what we're going to implement, and this is what we're going to do. I just feel like right now there is a lot of frustration with the way that the message is delivered, because everybody wants there to be a return to normalcy in the sense of the human interactions that we've had in public, in private, whether it's your business versus another business that gets to stay open.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of I mean, it's difficult as well when you watch hockey players, you know, they get to play a game they love. And they get to do so because they're in a privileged position, and say what you will about the entertainment value, keeping the masses appeased. But I'll tell you that it's very difficult, you know, as a member of a community, to watch, you know, professionals get to play their sport when local children and, you know, local communities are prevented from doing so. So the hypocrisy is, you know, is just prevalent.
The argument, I guess, for why that isn't now I can't say the word hypocrisy is perhaps because there's more control of said situation.
Right, they're in their own bubble.
Yeah, you're dealing with professionals. You're dealing with a very controlled environment. So I suppose that makes sense.
Yeah, okay, I see that too.
The more ambiguous nature of it, I guess, is when people have been very forward, complaining about how big business is always open, and how, you know, a lot of these small businesses were unfairly targeted by things. And then there's just these weird reactions to it at the same time as well. Like, they'll say, okay, fine, the reason that these big businesses are open is because they have these essential services. And to further down, like back down and say they're essential, they make them to tape off things that are not essential.
Which is weird because the first...
Yeah, that's really weird.
Like, are you not going to get sick because you're browsing for groceries instead of a new TV? Like, that's a weird distinction. Why?
It's bizarre.
Yeah.
You're already in the building.
You're already in the building. And the thing beyond that, too, like Costco, Walmart, all those places are open. Now they can't go to the small business, so they're all in the same place. And maybe it's a little bit more of a controlled environment in your mind. That just means you have no trust for your citizens. You have no trust that people can follow rules and regulations.
Yeah.
Well, it's tricky, but even what we're doing right now as a video production isn't as restricted as, say, opening your bakery to have customers come indoors. But I can't think of the logical reason for it, but our lawmakers seem to single certain things out like that.
It was interesting because the first few lockdowns, people were always saying, you know, give small businesses a chance, close down Walmart and Costco. well, I don't sell food, so that doesn't benefit me.
No.
But as soon as they did that with this one, and they started closing down sections, people got mad that they closed down sections. So it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't.
But and there's no logical reason for it. Like, you're just trying to say, oh, if you want a new television, you want to buy some kind of fancy gadget or something, you should stay home, is what I guess what they're trying to send. But at the same time,
but before,
they gotta go there to get groceries anyway.
Beforehand, the mentality was, if Walmart can stay open as an essential business because they sell food, but Eric's electronic superstore that just sells TVs has to close, and somebody needs a TV, Walmart gets a sale, not you.
Yeah.
So now
they
the
started taping it
playing
off.
field is a little leveled because they can't go directly into Walmart and buy the TV, just like they can't go directly into
It's
your
level, but in the
superstore.
wrong direction.
Yes.
Like, somebody is crippled and somebody isn't, so you cripple the other guy too.
But then
It's strange.
on the flip side of things, essential items, I can't go to a store, I can't go to Henry's and buy a camera, but that's essential to this aspect
to
of
the
the
business that you're allowed to run.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not a perfect system. I can buy a camera online, but I like to see what it feels like. And I can't do that right now, even though my business doing this or doing a corporate video is essential.
Yeah, the pressure is towards online purchases. The pressure is that you will make your purchase, virtually, but you lose that interaction with the item. And you lose a good chunk of sales. Somebody describing the item to you and making you feel like it's the right purchase.
I suppose what you work with is not a physical item, but do you think that the virtualness of your work has helped you perhaps be more efficient? Or,
well,
because you were already, jet setting and doing things on a laptop from
I
an airport.
definitely, that was, well, I mean.
And you said you liked meeting people in person, but do you really, when it gets down to it, do you work more efficiently?
I work more efficiently in person.
Okay.
And
Good to know.
But there are efficiencies that are gained in complex files. A good example is when you have a family making a purchase, one family member is in, Yellowknife, another family member is in Toronto, and maybe you have co-signers and another parent has to sign. And ordinarily, you'd be engaging a number of lawyers, and these other lawyers would have to meet with these people in person to sign those documents. So you can imagine the challenge of having a single set of documents with 3 people in 3 locations that each of them now have to meet with an individual lawyer to sign those documents. Well, now what I'll do is I'll blend it. Maybe I'll meet the primary purchaser, the person who's really responsible for the mortgage, and I'll meet them in person, and then I'll set up digital appointments with the other 2. So that process has really given, to me, it's a more holistic solution for people who are in transactions, who are purchasing or selling, especially sales. If you're out of the province or you have property in a different, you have property in Ontario and you live out east or out west, you can meet with a lawyer in Ontario. And what that means for me, and what that means for a lot of small businesses too, is, well, if this is the trajectory, then what are the tools? So yeah, efficiency is not necessarily gained because digital appointments always take me longer. I lose the reaction. I lose the body language when somebody is giving me like, hey, you're, slow down, because occasionally, third cup of coffee and it gets a little bit fast paced, but people want to, that interaction, the immediacy of having somebody in an appointment in person. I always enjoy those appointments more. In fact, I'm exhausted after a virtual appointment, staring at a screen, trying to understand where they are on the page. Now, I think that might improve as the technology, the sophistication of the technology, and people's expectations of how to use that technology. When there's a convergence in that regard, where they know they're showing up to a digital appointment, it's the second one they've done or third one they've done, and they know what to expect. They know how to use Zoom. They know how to use digital signings. That's going to cut back on some of the time, consumption.
An interesting thought I just had, as I think this pandemic has made much of the older population more tech savvy, because an interesting observation I had when I was going to my the fracture clinic after I had my ankle injury. There was a system in place at this clinic where they would send you a text message before your appointment, and it would, let you know when it was and all the details and give you information to reach out and contact if you needed to. And it was a pilot project, which they discontinued after a little while. I'm not exactly sure why. But while I was sitting there after they had discontinued it, pretty much entirely a population over 60, maybe even over 70 in some cases, were complaining to the secretaries that they really liked the system, which I never thought that they'd be the ones complaining about such a thing. You think that, they're trying to make it easier for people that, always walk around with their phone and they're always texting people. But no, the older population loved it. And I'm sure lots of those people learned how to use Zoom over the last year and things like that too. That's kind of neat.
Yes.
I think Zoom also nailed it in the sense that it is very easy to use if you're not the one setting up the meeting. So if a grandparent is requested to join a Zoom call with their son and their granddaughter or whatever, it is really just a few clicks and it does work, which I think given the timing and everything, they really nailed it that way.
So I guess more of the population is getting on the same page. So hopefully that makes this kind of work easier for you in the future.
And the nice thing is as we get older and as the people that are middle-aged get to the elder stage, they'll have spent more time with technology. So
that's one of the things too. I think making a habit of trying to keep yourself engaged with technology is I think that's important. I mean, I know growing up, having access to every video game system and, you got to play. You got to learn the art of trial and error within a digital device, because I think that that's the biggest barrier for accessing technology for most people is we got to do trial and error in our generation. I mean, at least, if you're born anywhere from 1980 onwards, you had exposure to this digital system, right? And now it's great to hear Elon Musk talk about the cell phone as being really you are bio-integrated with tech. This is an appendage, and it goes back to our access to internet. Your phone is now your ability to connect yourself to others and to obtain information. So is a cell phone a human right? Do we all have a right to communicate through a cell phone, especially during a lockdown?
Yeah,
people can't afford their cell phone bills. I think that's unfortunate.
Well, there's interesting pushes in Canada too. Like Jesse has a lot more experience with this than me, but there's government programs that are trying to get people in touch with technology, trying to get people new computers and things like that. So our government does understand that this
subsidized
Well,
people.
The other thing, when everything locked down, being, I guess, a new business, there wasn't a lot of grants or subsidies that we actually qualified for. The one that we did, and we were very happy to receive, was a digital transformation grant. And we got it. I'm glad we got it. Kind of restricted as to what we can do with it, because the money can go to paying for professional photos. I don't think I could get away with that because I'm capable of doing it. Same thing with the video side of things. And then there was money set aside, or there's money in the grant that can be allocated to building a website. Well, I already had a website. So it was really for the old school businesses that don't have the digital presence that the government, through the grant, they want these businesses to be able to digitally transform. And to its credit, we didn't have an online store, and now we do, so we did transform in that capacity. But I can see a lot of other businesses, it would have benefited them more, because there's some businesses that have been around forever that don't have any website or don't have any presence online outside of like a Google listing, and even some don't have the Google listing.
That's right.
This is almost a good place to plug what we do. If you're a business and you need stuff online, we can make stuff for your online presence, videos, photos.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some of the web stuff.
Yeah, I do. I'm growing with the web stuff too, which is nice.
Is there any, I guess, last things that maybe you came here thinking you might want to discuss or anything like that? Because we're getting towards the end of it, and I want to give you a chance.
Well, I mean, I think that when I was speaking to Jesse earlier, and he sort of asked me, what is it like to be a lawyer in a sense? And I think it's really important because you got to demystify what it is that lawyers do. we connect people to information. That's how we really earn our keep, because most of the time when you connect with a lawyer, whether it's beyond real estate, if you've got a legal question, there's information that you're looking for. So I'm a broker of information, and part of my skill set is that I'm able to offer you an opinion based upon how that information has implications legally, so
it gets me thinking. Have you ever thought of doing like a video series on YouTube or something like that, where
absolutely
you answer stuff? Cause
absolutely,
I want to point out I watch one lawyer on YouTube.
Oh, I bet you I know.
His name's Ian Runkle.
Okay.
He's a criminal defense and firearms lawyer, because I have a lot of like firearms related questions and stuff, like hunting and all that. But it was just something that interested me, because he looks at court cases like every week. He'll pull one up and he'll read it and demystify a lot of the legal speak. So I can see the value for that if you were to be interested in producing that kind of content, for sure.
Yeah, and I think breaking down cases is something that lawyers have started doing. There was an explosion in the blogosphere, right? A lot of lawyers were doing blogging, which is fantastic, because you get to read what other lawyers are saying about legal issues. And YouTube videos, exposure. I think that lawyers have a responsibility to engage members of the public on these topics, and maybe not everybody has that legal issue, but I think that's part of what we should be doing.
Sorry.
No, I'm just saying that's it though. Breaking it down, yeah.
The other thing that I think, the reason why we do this, and lawyers, real estate agents, doing something like this, even short form or long form videos, it personifies you.
Right? Oh, for sure, yeah.
Like Michael Liddiard, you're a lawyer, people know that, but when they get to see you, especially in regular non-lawyer garb,
you mean a beard and a hat?
Yeah, but it gives you a personality more so than just like with real estate agents being the super nice picture on a bus stop bench or something like that. Gives them a personality further than just the.
Yeah, you got to embody it for sure. You've got to have a presence, and
so if you ever want to do it, you know who to call.
Absolutely. Well, but yeah, no, that's being a lawyer for sure, is understanding that there's going to be a way to connect somebody to the answer, or at least likely outcomes. So that's the biggest responsibility I have. And even in real estate, most of your transactions are going to be smooth sailing. I've got to be there for questions that are maybe out of left field. Yeah,
you helped us months after the transaction at this place with a few other questions.
Yeah,
there.
Yeah,
it's good. So
yeah, absolutely. You've got to be a resource, and part of the nature of being a lawyer is building sort of a database of connections and networks and people who, if I don't have the answer for you, I know somebody who does. And that's really enriching for sure as far as a career path. That's got to be the most valuable of all, is getting to meet people and learning what they do well, and then putting them in touch with other people who they want to have that type of resource. So yeah, that's got to be the best part about it.
I do have one more question, just popped into my head.
Yeah.
When you look at your profession, and then you look at pop culture, do you ever get annoyed at how lawyers are portrayed in media? Like, do you enjoy,
I love it,
like Breaking Bad and stuff like that?
Oh, you know what? It's fantastic, because it lets people, whether or not it's so far removed from the truth, and of course every drama is sensationalized. But what these shows do a lot of the times is actually point to, ethical problems or challenges with clients and the type of business that you run. And it's hyper sensationalized, but at the same time, lawyers have to deal with a whole array of issues. And a lawyer's first obligation is to the court. A second obligation is to the public. And then the third obligation is to your client. So what that means is you can't lie to the court. You can't assist a client to do something which is, illegal. But provided that you're not advising them on how to do something illegal, you're advising them on how to, mitigate risk or reach a goal. And so shows like Suits, I think it really shows even the business side of things, power dynamics, and these are as much as they're sensationalized, they do happen. This is the context in which lawyers do operate. There are enemies and adversaries. I don't have any. At least I'm not aware of any. But I'm not aware of any. I try to play it pretty nice, and I think that's being a transactional lawyer mostly. My litigation practice is limited to people who've connected with me, usually in other regards, and then I'm able to take a retainer for situations that I feel are absolutely worth pursuing. But being a transactional lawyer means what's pragmatic, what's efficient. If you ask people to defend the unreasonable, usually they fall on their face, and that's why if you really want to be a good negotiator, point out what's unreasonable and ask them to defend it, and it usually doesn't go so well for them. So, and that's how you kind of keep people happy. You just you gotta be neutral in some contexts, but yeah, it's Suits and Breaking Bad with Saul Goodman. Better Call Saul is a fantastic show.
It is.
Kimmy Wexler is got to be my favorite, characterization, because there's the one scene where she's working on a huge shareholder agreement or something of that regard. It's she drives off the road. She loses consciousness.
Yeah.
That's the pressure that some lawyers will place on themselves. And that's a real mental health consideration, but it's every profession too. It's just that lawyers have a tendency to put way too much on their plates because the demands of the profession are so high. So I think the shows that expose those types of pressures are absolutely doing the public sort of inviting them to consider that there are some lawyers who have to deal with this type of stress. So yeah, I don't know. I think that any sensationalization still speaks to something fundamental to the challenges that a professional faces.
And it all comes from a kernel of truth, right? Most
I think it's
adaptations have some form of truth.
Yeah.
It's fun to end on that fictional note.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming.
Where can people find you if they're looking for a great transactional?
Yeah, well,
lawyer?
Liddiardlaw.ca.
Perfect.
And I'm, obviously you can reach me on the website.
And soon, if he plays his cards right, you'll be able to find him on YouTube.
I appreciate that, guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, my pleasure.